Cade Verdon tightened his grip on the S-45 pulse rifle, his eyes scanning the shimmering corridors of the Celesteris Citadel. The intricate walls, carved from some translucent alien crystal, pulsed faintly with a light that seemed alive. His combat vest weighed heavily on him, loaded with enough munitions to wage a skirmish, though he hoped not to need them. This mission was supposed to be a simple security detail, a precaution for a visiting alien dignitary. "You seem uneasy, Cade," said Envoy Lauren, the tall Austrian diplomat walking beside him. Lauren's silvery skin gleamed under the refracted light, and his voice carried a note of gentle amusement. Cade glanced at him, his expression stoic. "With all due respect, Envoy, peaceful species don't usually request human soldiers as bodyguards." Lauren chuckled, a deep, melodic sound. "Ah, but humans have a reputation. After your people's victory at Vega Prime, even the most resolute pacifist recognizes the strength of a Terran at their side." Cade gave a small nod, memories of Vega's fiery skies flashing briefly through his mind. Humanity had earned its place in the stars, but not without paying a steep price. The great doors ahead of them swung open, and Cade's breath caught. The throne chamber stretched beyond imagining, its ceiling an expanse of starlight suspended in an infinite crystal dome. Towering columns, carved with alien script, glowed faintly, each pulse synchronized to the rhythm of the cosmos. But it was not the room's majesty that held his gaze. It was the figure on the throne. Queen Astria of the Austrian sovereignty sat poised, regal yet ethereal. Her cerulean skin seemed to shimmer, as if catching an unseen starlight, and the flowing gown she wore, deep crimson streaked with threads of gold, clung to her form with an elegance that transcended species. Her hair, a cascade of living flame, shifted as though it had a will of its own. "Envoy Lauren," she greeted, her voice resonant, commanding yet melodic. "And your Terran escort?" Her gaze swept to Cade, her silver eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Your Majesty," Cade said, inclining his head, his tone formal but measured. Her piercing gaze lingered on him, assessing, though her expression betrayed nothing. The room was alive with subtle tension. Cade's instincts sharpened, honed by years of combat. Something was off. The meeting commenced, filled with ceremonial pleasantries, but Cade's senses remained on high alert. His sharp eyes caught the faint shimmer of movement near the upper balconies. Reflex took over. "Get down," he roared, lunging forward. His body collided with the Queen's, pulling her from her throne just as a plasma bolt scorched through the air where she'd been seated. The crystalline throne exploded into glittering shards. Cade rolled to his feet, pulse rifle sweeping the room. He spotted the source, a figure cloaked in active camouflage, retreating towards a shadowed alcove. Two precise squeezes of the trigger. The first shot disrupted the cloaking field, the second dropped the assassin. The chamber erupted into chaos as guards swarmed, but Cade remained a shield, his body positioned protectively between the Queen and danger. "Hold!" Queen Astria's voice rang out, cutting through the commotion. She rose to her feet, her composure remarkable save for a faint tremble in her hands. "It seems I owe you my life, Terran. Just doing my job, Your Majesty," Cade replied, lowering his weapon but remaining on edge. "No," she said, her voice now cool, formal. "It is not merely a debt, it is law. By the sacred edicts of Austrian tradition, a life saved binds the Savior to a single wish, anything within my power to grant." Her words carried the weight of an ancient oath, and the room fell silent. Cade met her gaze steadily, though the gravity of the moment pressed on him. "With respect, Your Majesty, I decline." "You cannot." Her tone was sharp, her gaze unwavering. "To refuse would bring dishonor to both our peoples. You must make a wish." Cade hesitated, his mind racing. Her piercing eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw more than a queen. He saw a being burdened by solitude, veiled behind layers of duty and power. His decision crystallized. "I wish," he said, his voice steady, "to stand at your side, not as a guard, but as an equal, The collective gasp of the assembly was almost deafening. Queen Astria's expression flickered between shock and something Cade couldn't quite place. Her azure skin deepened in hue. A blush? "You dare," she hissed, her composure cracking, though the laws she had invoked held her bound. Tradition left her no choice. "Take him to my chambers," she ordered coldly. "I will deal with this presumption, personally." Later, within the Queen's private quarters, the tension between them remained palpable. The room itself was a marvel. Crystalline walls alive with bioluminescent patterns, exuding warmth and elegance. "Of all the wishes you could have made," Astria said, her voice taut with disbelief, "why this?" "Because I saw you," Cade replied. "Not just a queen, but someone burdened by their crown. I asked for the chance to know the person beneath the title." For a long moment, Astria studied him, her silvery eyes searching. Then, to his surprise, the faintest smile tugged at her lips. "Your audacity is distinctly Terran," she sighed, brushing a strand of fiery hair behind her ear. "Perhaps, Cade Verdon, you are exactly the kind of chaos my life has been missing." And with that, the alien queen's priceless reaction to his wish sparked the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. Cade adjusted the high-collared Austrian formal wear, the silver fabric shifting seamlessly with his movements as if alive. The garment, while elegant, felt as foreign as the crystalline palace around him. Yet, standing in Queen Astria's private chambers, it was clear he was no longer a mere outsider. "Still figuring it out?" Astria's voice came from behind him. She leaned casually against a glowing archway, her fiery hair cascading over one shoulder. For the first time since their chaotic first meeting, her expression bore a hint of genuine amusement. Cade glanced at her reflection in a polished obsidian panel. "Earth fashion is simpler. We don't usually wear clothing that seems like it might outthink us." Astria chuckled, stepping closer. "The bioleum fabric is responsive to temperature, posture, and even mood. It adapts to reflect the wearer's state. Right now," she gestured at the silver and emerald hues shifting across his attire. "You're projecting cautious optimism." Cade smirked. "And what's the queen of an interstellar empire projecting right now?" "Curiosity," she admitted, stepping past him and tracing her fingers along the edge of a crystalline table. "You've already caused quite the stir. My advisors are in uproar. My security council believes you're part of some Terran ploy, and half the court thinks I've lost my mind for entertaining this arrangement. And the other half?" Astria turned to face him fully. "They think I've finally made a bold move worthy of my lineage." "Bold, huh?" Cade crossed his arms, his tone teasing. "I'm not sure they'd be as impressed if they knew how often boldness is just humans winging it." Her lips quirked into a smile, though her eyes betrayed a deeper, unspoken tension. "The court's perception doesn't concern me. What does is the reality of what you've chosen. Do you understand the weight of your wish, Cade Verdon?" He stepped closer, maintaining a respectful distance but holding her gaze. "I understand more than you think. I've led squads into battles we couldn't win. I've made choices that cost lives because the alternative was worse. I know what it means to carry the weight of leadership, even if it's not on the scale you deal with." Her expression softened, but her tone remained firm. "Then you know this isn't just about you and me. A Terran forging such a bond with the Austrian monarchy will send shockwaves across the galaxy. Our alliance with Earth is tenuous as it is. Many will see this as a calculated power move." Cade's jaw tightened. "I didn't make that wish to start a political firestorm. I made it because I saw you, not the queen, but the person. If that's a problem, I'll face it head on, same as I've faced every other challenge in my life." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the bioluminescent walls pulsing softly in rhythm with Astria's contemplative gaze. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, Cade. If you're determined to see this through, then we'll do it my way. The High Solstice Festival is in 3 days. It's the most significant event of our cultural calendar, and I'll need to present you to the court." He arched a brow. "Present me? As what, exactly?" Astria's eyes gleamed with a mix of mischief and challenge. "As my consort in waiting, the Court of Whispers." The Celestra Grand Hall was a sight to behold. cascading banners of luminous silk draped from vaulted ceilings, while crystalline sculptures suspended midair refracted light into endless rainbows. The room thrummed with the energy of Austrian nobility and off-world dignitaries, each vying for attention amidst the symphony of alien languages and customs. Cade stood near Astria at the apex of the throne dais, the weight of countless eyes bearing down on him. Whispers swept through the hall like a rising tide. Is that the Terran? A barbarian dressed in royal silk. Absurd. Humans always audacious, aren't they? Cade kept his expression neutral, his posture disciplined. He was used to hostile environments, but this was a battlefield of words, not weapons. Astria, however, was in her element. She addressed the gathering with commanding grace, her voice resonating as she detailed the importance of unity and strength amidst the turbulent galaxy. Yet even as she spoke, Cade could sense the undercurrent of tension. A challenge was coming. It didn't take long. From the crowd, a figure stepped forward, draped in resplendent gold armor and adorned with a mantle of radiant feathers. Lord Calixtus, a high-ranking Austrian noble and vocal critic of Terran involvement in their affairs. Your Majesty, Calixtus said, his tone polite but laced with disdain. Your words are as inspiring as ever. Yet I cannot help but question the wisdom of bringing a Terran soldier into the fold at such a critical time. Surely you understand the implications of such a unique arrangement? The murmurs swelled, and Cade felt Astria tense beside him. Before she could respond, Cade stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd. Lord Calixtus, was it? Let's not pretend this is about the timing. You don't like humans, and you definitely don't like me standing here. So why not skip the pretense and say what you really mean? A hush fell over the hall, the brazenness of his words shocking the assembled nobles. Astria shot him a warning glance, but there was a glimmer of approval in her eyes. Calixtus's face darkened. Very well, Terran. I question what value you bring to the Queen or the Austrian people. If you claim otherwise, perhaps you'd care to prove it? Cade's lips curved into a slight grin. Name the challenge. The challenge of the fates. In Austrian tradition, disputes of worth were often settled through a ritual known as the challenge of the fates, a blend of combat, strategy, and diplomacy, designed to test not only physical prowess but also intellect and character. The next morning, Cade stood in an open arena surrounded by Austrian dignitaries. Astria watched from a high balcony, her expression inscrutable. Calixtus stood across from Cade, armed with a sleek Austrian glaive that glimmered with plasma edges. First trial, a herald announced. The test of strength. Calixtus lunged, his movements fluid and precise. Cade sidestepped, his human reflexes honed by years of battle. He countered with calculated strikes, refusing to be outpaced by alien agility. The crowd watched in rapt silence as the two clashed, Cade relying on grit and adaptability to keep up. By the end of the first trial, both combatants were bloodied but standing. The second trial, a battle of wits in a holographic simulation of interstellar diplomacy, pushed Cade's tactical mind to its limits. The third trial, an impromptu speech to the crowd, tested his ability to inspire. When the trials concluded, the herald turned to Astria. Your Majesty, the victor is yours to name. Astria rose, her voice ringing clear. Cade Verdon has proven his worth, not only in strength, but in heart and resolve. Let this serve as a reminder to us all. Greatness is not bound by species, but by spirit. The crowd erupted into cheers and murmurs, while Calixtus bowed stiffly, his defeat etched into his face. Cade glanced up at Astria, and for a moment, their eyes met, an unspoken promise forming between them. The High Solstice Festival marked the beginning of Cade's place in a galaxy far larger and more complex than he'd ever imagined. But as he walked beside Astria through the crystalline halls that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the start of a much greater journey. The crystalline spires of the Austrian capital shimmered under the twin moon's light as Cade made his way through the palace gardens. The air was alive with the subtle hum of bioluminescent flora, their glow casting ghostly patterns on the path. Though the High Solstice Festival had ended, The energy of the day still thrummed in his veins. He had proven himself in the arena, won over a skeptical court, and, most importantly, earned a measure of trust from Astria. Yet, Cade knew better than to bask in triumph. He had felt the weight of unseen eyes during the festivities, sensed the tension that lingered even in the Queen's rare smiles. Something darker brewed beneath the surface of Austrian politics, and it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a familiar figure leaning against a gleaming obsidian fountain. Ambassador Teros, Astria's trusted advisor and confidant, greeted him with a curt nod. The silver-skinned Austrian had a knack for blending into the background, an unusual trait for a diplomat. Tonight, however, he seemed determined to stand out. "You're a hard man to corner, Cade Verdon," Teros said, his voice smooth and measured. "The Queen keeps you close." Cade crossed his arms, studying the alien. "And you've gone out of your way to find me. What's on your mind?" Teros gestured to a nearby bench, its crystalline surface glowing softly as they sat. "There are forces within the Austrian hierarchy who see your presence as a threat, not just to tradition, but to their own ambitions. You've made enemies without even trying." "Figures," Cade muttered. "I've got a talent for stepping on toes." Teros smiled faintly. "It's not just your boldness that unnerves them. It's your effect on Astria. The Queen is strong, but she walks a precarious path. Your influence complicates matters." Cade leaned forward, his tone sharpening. "If you're here to warn me off, save your breath. I'm not going anywhere." Teros's gaze was unreadable. "On the contrary, I'm here to ensure you're prepared. The Queen has few allies she can trust. If you mean to stand at her side, you must understand the stakes." Cade frowned. "I'm listening." "The hidden enemy." Teros's voice dropped to a near whisper, his silvery skin reflecting the faint glow of the garden. "Have you heard of the Shadow Conclaves?" Cade shook his head. "Doesn't sound like a social club." "It's not," Teros said grimly. "The Conclave is a cabal of influential nobles and military leaders who believe the monarchy has grown weak. They resent Astria's willingness to ally with other species, especially humans. To them, you're the embodiment of everything wrong with her rule." Cade sat back, processing the information. "And they're planning something?" Teros nodded. "I've intercepted whispers of a meeting, but their network is vast and well-guarded. If they move against the Queen, it won't be through open rebellion. They'll strike from the shadows, exploiting weaknesses until she's isolated and overthrown." Cade's jaw tightened. "What do you need me to do?" The ambassador hesitated, his gaze searching Cade's face. "If I tell you, you must act without hesitation. The Queen cannot know. Not yet. If the Conclave suspects we're onto them, they'll go underground, and we may lose our only chance to stop them." Cade's instinct screamed at him to trust no one, but something in Teros's expression, earnest and edged with desperation, gave him pause. He nodded. "I'm in. What's the plan?" Teros rose, his movements quick and fluid. "There's a meeting tonight in the Undercity, beneath the palace. I've arranged for you to infiltrate it. If you can identify the key players, we'll have leverage to dismantle their network." "Infiltration's not exactly my specialty," Cade said dryly. "But I'll manage." Teros placed a small, glowing device in Cade's hand. "This hollow emitter will disguise you as an Austrian. It's a crude solution, but it should fool them long enough to gather intel. Be cautious. If they discover your true identity, they won't hesitate to kill you." The Undercity was a stark contrast to the palace above. While the crystalline spires of Austrian civilization reached for the heavens, the depths below were a labyrinth of shadow and decay. Cade moved through narrow alleys and dimly lit corridors, the hollow emitter casting a shimmering illusion of an Austrian noble over his human form. Teros's directions led him to an unmarked entrance guarded by two hulking figures in dark armor. Cade's disguise held as he presented a forged sigil, and the guards stepped aside. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Austrian nobles and military leaders milled about, their voices low and conspiratorial. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform, where a figure cloaked in shadow addressed the assembly. Cade moved closer, careful to keep his movements unremarkable. The queen has grown weak, the figure declared, their voice distorted by a voice modulator. She panders to alien powers, compromising our sovereignty. And now, she entertains a Terran, an insult to our heritage. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Cade clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. He scanned the room, noting key players. Calixus, his expression smug, a high-ranking general he recognized from earlier court proceedings, and several others whose faces he committed to memory. "We must act," the figure continued. "The Solstice Festival has solidified her position, but it has also exposed her vulnerabilities. If we strike now, we can reclaim the throne for the Austrian people." Cade's earpiece crackled softly, Teros's voice a whisper in his ear. "Do you see the shadowed speaker? That's their leader. If you can tag them with the holotracer, we can track their movements after the meeting." "Got it," Cade muttered, palming the small device. He waited for the right moment, weaving through the crowd until he was within arm's reach of the speaker. With a practiced motion, he brushed past them, the tracer adhering silently to their cloak. The meeting ended soon after, the conspirators dispersing into the shadows. Cade slipped away, his heart pounding. He had what he needed, but he also knew the game had just begun. A queen's burden. Cade returned to the palace under cover of darkness, slipping into Astria's chambers. She stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. She didn't turn as he entered, but her voice was laced with weariness. "You were gone for hours. Had some things to take care of," he replied, setting the hollow emitter on a nearby table. "I'm guessing you already," her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I always know when something stirs beneath my palace." She studied him intently, her expression unreadable. "You've been busy, Cade, and from the look on your face, I suspect it's something I'm not going to like." Cade hesitated, weighing his next words carefully. "There's something you need to know, Astria, and it can't wait." Queen Astria's chambers seemed to absorb the tension in the air as Cade took a step closer. The faint glow of the crystalline walls cast her features in an ethereal light, but her regal calm was shadowed by a flicker of unease. "Speak plainly, Cade," she said, her voice steady, though her hands clasped tightly in front of her betrayed the weight of her concern. "What have you uncovered?" Cade drew a deep breath, steeling himself. "There's a faction, powerful and organized. They call themselves the Shadow Conclave. They're planning to move against you, Astria. Tonight, I infiltrated one of their meetings in the Undercity." Her silver eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with sharp focus. "You took this upon yourself? Without consulting me?" "I didn't want to risk tipping them off," Cade replied. "This was the only way to gather intel, without them realizing we're onto them. And I got what we needed." He gestured toward the small hollow emitter on the table. "One of their leaders, the speaker at the meeting, has been tagged with a tracer. Teros should be able to track them back to wherever they're hiding." Astria's gaze flicked to the device, then back to Cade. "You're working with Teros?" "He approached me earlier tonight," Cade admitted. "Said he wanted to ensure you had someone watching your back." And he wasn't wrong. These people aren't just talking. They're preparing to act. "You're in danger, Astria." For a long moment, the queen was silent, her expression inscrutable. Then, with a slow nod, she crossed the room to stand before him. "You're either reckless or remarkably brave, Cade Verdon. Perhaps both. But you've put yourself at incredible risk, again, for my sake." He shrugged, the hint of a grin tugging at his lips. "You're worth it." Astria's lips curved faintly, though the gesture didn't reach her eyes. "Flattery will only get you so far, Terran." A growing divide. The following morning, the queen summoned her inner council to her private study. Cade stood at her side, still dressed in the flowing Austrian formal that he found increasingly less alien. Around the crystalline table, the key advisors and military leaders of the Austrian monarchy gathered, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Teros began the briefing, detailing the intel gathered from the tracer Cade had placed. A three-dimensional projection of the city appeared above the table, highlighting a hidden network of tunnels beneath the palace. "The tracer has revealed their primary meeting point," Teros explained. "It's located here, in an abandoned energy hub from the early colonization era. It's heavily shielded and accessible only through secure routes. General Zyvar, a burly Austrian with cobalt skin and a permanent scowl, leaned forward. If we know their location, why not storm it and eliminate the threat? Because it's not that simple, Kate interjected. The Conclave isn't just a group of malcontents. They're embedded in your military, your government. If we move too soon, we risk exposing Astria to retaliation from within her own ranks. The general's eyes narrowed. And what qualifies a Terran to advise us on matters of our sovereignty? Cade met the alien's glare without flinching. The fact that I've been in more battles than most of you can imagine. I've seen what happens when enemies undermine leadership from within. If you don't root them out carefully, you'll lose everything. Enough, Astria said sharply, her tone brooking no argument. Cade is here because he has proven his loyalty, something I expect from all of you. General Zyvar, you will focus your energies on bolstering the palace's defenses. Taros, continue monitoring the tracer. I want to know the identities of every conspirator before we make a move. Her gaze swept the room, silencing further dissent. The Conclave is a threat to all of us. We will face it together or fall divided. Am I clear? A chorus of affirmations followed, though the undercurrent of tension remained. As the council dispersed, Astria turned to Cade, her voice low. Your presence unsettles them, but your insight is valuable. Stay close. I may need your unique perspective in the days to come. Always, Cade replied, his voice laced with sincerity. The Queen's Gamble. Later that evening, Astria and Cade stood on one of the palace balconies, the city below alive with 1,000 points of light. The hum of distant activity was a soothing backdrop, but the weight of their conversation hung heavily between them. You've put me in an impossible position, Astria said, her tone softer now, though no less serious. By exposing the Conclave, you've forced me to confront a truth I've long suspected but hoped to avoid. My throne is no longer secure. It's better to face the truth now than to wait for it to blindside you, Kate said. You're strong, Astria. Your people respect you. The ones who matter will stand with you. And the others? She asked, her voice tinged with doubt. If I fail to root out this conspiracy, it could spark a civil war. My people have known peace for generations. I cannot be the queen who plunges them into chaos. You won't be, Cade said, stepping closer, because you're not alone in this. You've got allies, ones you can trust. Her silver eyes met his, searching for something in his expression. And you, Cade? Why do you stand by me? What is it you truly seek? Cade hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. I told you when I made my wish, I want to stand by you, Astria. Not because of your crown or your power, but because of who you are. That hasn't changed. For a long moment, she said nothing, her gaze unreadable. Then, with a small, almost imperceptible nod, she turned back to the city lights. Very well. If you mean to stand at my side, prepare yourself. The days ahead will test us both. I wouldn't have it any other way, Cade replied. Above them, the twin moons hung low on the horizon, their light casting long shadows over the palace. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, a foreboding reminder that the battle was far from over. The air in the Undercity was thick with the metallic tang of old machinery and the faint hum of the forgotten energy hub. Cade moved like a shadow through the network of tunnels, his Austrian comm link active in his ear. This is madness, Taros's voice crackled softly. You're one man against an entire conspiracy. I'm not planning to fight the entire conspiracy, Cade replied, his voice low but confident. I'm here to confirm their plans and create an opening for you. Just be ready when I give the signal. In the crystalline palace far above, Astria watched the projection of Cade's movements with a frown. He's reckless, but effective, she murmured, her tone more a statement than reassurance. He is Terran, Taros said with grudging respect. They thrive in chaos. Into the depths, Cade reached a rusted access door that led to the Conclave's meeting chamber. The tracer he had planted earlier had guided him here, and now, faint voices carried through the cracks in the door. He pressed his ear against it, straining to catch their words. The queen grows complacent, one voice said, low and bitter. Her reliance on outsiders weakens her. She underestimates our reach, another said. When we strike, it will be swift and decisive. By the time she realizes what's happening, it will be too late. Cade slipped a small hollow recorder from his belt, placing it near the door. He needed every word captured if they were going to dismantle this conspiracy. But then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Footsteps approaching from behind. He spun, weapon raised, but it was too late. A stun pulse hit him square in the chest, and the world went black. Captive among traitors. When Cade awoke, he was bound to a chair in the center of a dimly lit chamber. Around him, shadowed figures loomed, their faces obscured by hoods. One of them stepped forward, lowering their hood to reveal an Austrian man with piercing amber eyes. So, the Queen's pet Terran thought he could play spy. The man sneered. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your little tracer? I figured I'd at least make it harder for you. Cade replied, managing a smirk despite his situation. The man's expression darkened. You've meddled in affairs far beyond your comprehension. But don't worry. You'll have the honor of sending a message to your queen. A holographic communicator was brought into the room, and the amber-eyed leader activated it. Astria's image appeared, her regal composure unshaken despite the sight of Cade bound and surrounded. Cade Verdon, Astria said, her tone icy. What mess have you gotten yourself into this time? The leader stepped into view, addressing her with a mocking bow. Your Majesty, consider this a warning. Your reign is over. The Shadow Conclave has waited long enough to take what is rightfully ours. Astria's silver eyes glinted with quiet fury. Release him, and I may show you mercy. Mercy? The leader laughed. You're in no position to make demands. This Terran will be the first casualty of your fall. Cade leaned forward in his bonds, his voice cutting through the room. You really don't know her, do you? Astria doesn't bargain with traitors. Silence him, the leader snapped. But before anyone could act, the chamber was rocked by an explosion. The walls trembled, and chunks of debris fell from the ceiling. Cade grinned, recognizing the sound of Austrian military-grade charges. Took you long enough. The doors burst open, and a squad of royal guards flooded the room, led by Teros himself. In the chaos, Cade broke free of his bonds, ducking a wild swing from one of the conclave members and delivering a sharp elbow to their gut. Astria's voice crackled over the comms in Teros' ear. Secure Cade and eliminate the threat. No survivors. The Shadow Conclave fought fiercely, but they were no match for the Queen's elite forces. One by one, the conspirators fell, until only the leader remained. He tried to flee, but was stopped by Cade, who leveled a blaster at his chest. This is for all the people you've endangered, Cade said, pulling the trigger. The leader crumpled to the ground, lifeless. A quiet victory. Hours later, Cade stood before Astria in her private chambers. His formal Austrian attire was torn and soot-streaked, but he stood tall, his brown eyes meeting her silver ones. You disobeyed my orders, she said, though there was no anger in her voice. I made a judgment call, Cade replied, and I'd do it again if it meant keeping you safe. Astria sighed, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. You're insufferable, Terran, and you're impossible to please, Cade shot back, grinning. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day's events settling over them. Then Astria stepped closer, her voice soft. Cade, what you did was reckless, but it reminded me of something important. A queen may rule alone, but she cannot stand alone. Cade smiled, his voice warm. I'm not going anywhere, Astria. You can count on that. For the first time, the queen allowed herself a genuine smile. Good, because I suspect this is only the beginning. As the twin moons rose over the crystalline palace, casting their light over the city, Astria and Cade stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future might bring together.